Random floats. Maybe sometimes we don't have data. We're waiting on somebody to give us numbers, files, so we might want to generate random data while we wait. Or sometimes we have our own code, but we want to test with random values and we might not think of all of them. So first, generating random numbers. The one function we want to introduce today is rand. And it's another one of those versatile functions, as in you can use them with different number of arguments, just like fprintf. Fprintf, you can put one string, or you can put variables, you can do a lot of things. So there's a lot of versatility in this one. If I use it to the most basic way possible, rand, and that is it, then it'll generate one float between 0 and 1, both excluded, and that's all it'll do. For example, k equals rand 0.8147. If I do it again, 0.9058. Again, 0.1270, 0.9134. So you notice I'm never close to anything other than 0 or 1. I'm in between those two things. And that's it. That's all rand does. Now in the future, we're going to start learning different types of variables such as vectors and matrices. If you decide to put an argument inside the rand function, it will generate a matrix. What's that mean? Well, let me try the same thing, but with a 3 inside. So again, all the numbers are still between 0 and 1, but we decided to create 9 values at a time. That's what we call a matrix, and you have seen this in math class. But right now, we don't really have a use for it. Now, the other way of using it is specifying 2 arguments. So not just a 3, but maybe a 4 in there. You'll notice that we control not only the number of rows in this time, but also the number of columns. Again, that's something that we'll see in the very future. Now, there are a lot of ways to use rand. X equal rand is the one that I just showed. Some will do and rand with empty parentheses, just to remind yourself that it's not your variable that you created, but a function. Some things to avoid is to put a 1, because you'll notice that it does exactly the same thing, so might as well not overdo it. Rand2 will create a 2 by 2 matrix, and rand2, 5, again, what will that do? Will it be a number between 2 and 5? No. Every number always stays between 0 and 1. So what if I did want a number between 2 and 5? Well, that's the point. We're only going to have 0 and 1 to start with, then we have to manipulate it. But let's see, it's actually pretty easy. So, we're stuck with starting with a value between 0 and 1. It will never ever be a 0, it will never ever be a 1. We're in between that, no matter what we do. If you notice here, I have the exact same sequence as I had when I gave you an example 2 seconds ago. To be honest, if you did it on your own with me, we all had the same thing. So it's not really that random. There is a sequence that's predefined, and there are ways to start randomly in that sequence. If you want to learn more, definitely check the documentation. Keep in mind that that value inside has nothing to do with the boundaries. We are only controlling the dimension of the variable. So, how can I make it between A and B? I don't want between 0 and 1. Well, let's do 2 simple operations here. Plus. What happens when we do plus? If you have a value between 0 and 1 and you add 2 to it, what the value will likely be between what and what? Simple algebra. If you want a little idea, start with the both extremities. 0. What if you add a 2 to something that's close to 0? You'll end up with a 2. How about if you add a 2 with something close to 1? You'll end up with a 3. So now you'll be in between 2 and 3. Still not included. We're never going to hit 2. We're never going to hit 3. So let's do x equals rand plus 2. Again, rand is between 0 and 1. So technically x should be between 2 and 3. 2.9. If I do it again, 2.03. Do it again, 2.437. Do it again and again and again and again. All I'm doing is using the up arrow key to call back my history. Notice it's completely random at this point. Your turn. What can I say about subtracting now? K minus 4. What kind of interval will that be into? Well, let's give it a shot. Rand minus 4. Oop, negative 3.2. Negative 3.8. Negative 3.5. 3.5. 3.3. 3.2. Looks like I'm between negative 3 and negative 4. Why is that? Well, again, here's a little idea. Anything close to 0. What's 0 minus 4? Minus 4. So it'll be close to negative 4. Anything close to 1. What's 1 minus 4? Negative 3. So that's why we end up between negative 3 and negative 4. So basically what we can say is that a plus and a minus shifts your interval left or right. What's the other symbol in math class? Multiply and divide. What happens if you multiply a range? The range is between 0 and 1 again. What can we say about 5 times that thing? Same mentality. What's 5 times 0? 0. So basically, if you multiply anything, the rand, you'll always start at 0 no matter what. And then how about the 1.0? What's 1, 5? Well, it's 5. So notice how we didn't shift our interval, we didn't move it along the axis, but instead we grew it. What can you do about divide? K divided by 2. Anything that's between 0 and 1 and you divide it by 2 will be between 0 and 0.5. So this one grows or shrinks the interval. Well, guess what? We can actually combine them. And by doing that, we can grow, shrink, shift, and do everything we want to generate whatever number we would like. I want to generate a value between 15 and 20. Now, if I add first, add the 15, then I'm between 15 and 16. Try to find a multiplication that will leave the 15 the same and move the 16 to the 20. Not simple. So always multiply first. How big should your interval be here? How wide is this interval? 5. 20 minus 15 is 5. And then you shifted it. So then the multiplication usually happens first. You multiply by 5. It'll do an interval between 0 and 5. And then you add 15, and that will shift it to 15 and 20. Your turn. How do I generate this one? Well, how wide again is your interval? Remember to multiply first. How wide is this thing? You have 5, 5 on the left, 5, 5 on the right. That's 11 total. So you're going to multiply by 11. That will make an interval between 0 and 11. But then you want to shift it to the left. So you subtract 5.5. So keep that in mind. It's just plus minus division. It doesn't get simpler than that mathematically wise. But you just have to practice a little bit, multiply by something, use hand gestures. To be honest, while I'm talking, I'm making my hand gestures to keep it in mind, like, okay, I want this to be that big, and then I want to move it. And it just is very simple, but it does take practice. If you want to remember a formula, you can do this one. Rand times b minus a, which is how wide your interval is, plus a is the starting point, noting that a can be negative value. Let's do an example. We have a new thermometer that's being built, and we've been tasked to do a code. We want to indicate warning and a bunch of other things. But we're being paid to develop this, and we don't have an actual hands-on. And that happens quite often. We're just waiting and waiting and waiting, and we can't just sit around. So I'm just going to code a random number to start with. So here I am. I've been waiting for you to do this. The company's not building it. They're on back order. I don't know what's going on. I have my entire algorithm ready to go. I just can't sit around. I'm tired of this. So instead of trying to detect the temperature using the actual hardware, maybe I'll just generate a random number between 95 and 110. So again, we have rand, correctly spelled, and how wide is your interval? From 95 to 110. Now you can type times 110 minus 95, but honestly that's simple math. What is it? 15. So go ahead and type 15. But that will only generate between 0 and 15, because right now if I start actually testing, 4.4, 10, 9, 2, 1, 7, 14. Notice how easy and fast this is. Okay, so I'm not between 95 and 110. I'm between 0 and 15. Well, that's okay. If I add 95, I'll move that big interval to 95 and above. So, yay! It works. So now I can actually do code. It's like I should indicate temperature. Okay, so that was I was ready to do. That was pretty much safe. Temperature is Fahrenheit. Yes, Fahrenheit. And once again, I can test this pretty fast. What did I forget? What did I mess up? My placeholder. Seems to be correct. Seems to work. So I've tested maybe 20 times right here. And that's what random numbers are about. They're easy to do, easy to test, instead of waiting for someone to give you values. So wrapping up, we saw the function call rand. Remember that the arguments inside, we shouldn't really use them unless we have done vectors and matrices at this time. But it's a very versatile function. We can use it with a different type of argument and it does something different. It generates, no matter what, a number between 0 and 1. So we did learn how to manipulate that using ultra simple algebra. Some of you will find this difficult, but keep in mind you're going to see differential equation, derivative, integrals. Adding, subtracting should remain quite simple at this time. So stay focused and just practice and you'll be fine with this. And I did one example on the temperature.